What if the strangest mystery about Antarctica wasn't hidden under the ice? What if it was hidden in plain sight, on maps drawn hundreds of years before Antarctica was officially discovered? Because when historians compare the world maps of the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries, something unusual keeps appearing. Sea monsters. Not randomly scattered across the oceans, not placed equally in every unknown region, but concentrated, again and again, around the far south, the region where Antarctica exists today. Now, the easy explanation is simple. Ancient cartographers decorated empty spaces with mythical creatures, and that's true. But here's the problem. When multiple map makers from different countries, different empires, and different centuries all place warnings in the exact same region, it starts to feel less like decoration and more like a signal. And that raises a deeply uncomfortable question. Were these maps trying to warn people away from something? To understand this mystery, we first need to understand how ancient map makers worked. During the medieval and Renaissance periods, maps were far more than navigation tools. They were political weapons, scientific documents, and symbols of power. An empty space on a map was considered a problem. Cartographers hated blank areas, so they filled them with illustrations, ships, kingdoms, exotic animals, and sea monsters. Historians call this tradition horror vacui, the fear of empty space. At first glance, the monsters surrounding the southern oceans seem perfectly normal within that tradition. But when researchers began comparing major maps side by side, something strange emerged. The monsters weren't distributed evenly. They clustered around one specific region, the southern edge of the world. The approach to Antarctica. That consistency is difficult to ignore, because these weren't just isolated drawings by one imaginative artist. These were maps created across generations by independent cartographers who often worked for rival empires. Yet somehow, they kept marking the same place. One of the most controversial examples appeared in 1513. An Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis created a world map using older source charts collected from Greek, Arabic, and Portuguese sailors. Only fragments of the map survive today, but the surviving section contains something extraordinary: a southern landmass extending far below South America. Most historians say this is simply a distorted version of South America's coastline, combined with a theoretical southern continent. That explanation is completely reasonable. But in the 1950s, researcher Arlington Mallory made a shocking claim. He argued that the coastline on the Piri Reis map resembled Antarctica, specifically the coastline beneath the ice sheet. At first, that sounds impossible. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, and modern subglacial mapping technology didn't exist until the 20th century. So how could a map from 1513 resemble land hidden under miles of ice? Now, to be fair, many scholars reject this interpretation. They argue the map distortions are being overanalyzed, and they may be right. But here's what keeps the debate alive. Piri Reis himself wrote notes on the map, saying he compiled it from much older source materials. He wasn't claiming discovery, he was claiming inheritance. And that creates a disturbing possibility. What exactly were those older maps showing? The mystery deepens with another map. In 1531, French mathematician and cartographer Laurent Fine drew a remarkably detailed southern continent, not a vague shape. A continent with mountain ranges, rivers, bays, and coastal features. And centuries later, radar scans beneath Antarctica's ice revealed something deeply unsettling. Some of those geographical patterns roughly matched the hidden terrain beneath the ice. Not perfectly, but closely enough to raise questions. Then came another map maker. In 1737, French geographer Philippe Bouache created a map showing Antarctica divided into two major landmasses separated by an inland sea. At the time, nobody had explored Antarctica, nobody had surveyed it, And yet modern subglacial studies later revealed that Antarctica is, in fact, divided into two major geological regions, separated by a massive basin buried under ice. Again, this could all be coincidence. That is the mainstream position. These cartographers may simply have been theorizing based on symmetry and speculation. But when coincidence keeps repeating across centuries, the pattern becomes harder to dismiss emotionally, even if it remains scientifically unproven. And through all of these maps, one thing remains strangely consistent: the monsters. This is where the mystery becomes genuinely fascinating. The monsters weren't scattered randomly across every unknown ocean. They gathered near the southern threshold, almost like markers. On the famous 1569 world map by Gerardus Mercator, monstrous creatures appear near the approach to the southern continent. The same thing appears on maps by Abraham Ortelius. Different map makers, different countries, different political loyalties. Yet the same symbolic pattern repeats. And that raises a question historians rarely ask directly. What if the monsters weren't just decoration? What if they functioned as navigational warnings? Because during this period, maps were strategic military assets. Empires treated geographic information like classified intelligence. Portugal hid maritime routes from Spain. Spain restricted map circulation. The Ottoman Empire protected naval cartography. This wasn't conspiracy theory. This was standard imperial behavior. So imagine you are a Renaissance cartographer with access to fragmented information about a mysterious southern region. You don't want to erase it completely. That would attract attention. Instead, you surround it with danger, with symbols every sailor understands immediately. Do not go here. In that context, the monsters stop looking decorative. They start looking operational. But there's a major problem with all of this, a huge one. Modern geology says Antarctica has been covered in ice for millions of years, long before human civilization existed. If that timeline is correct, and most scientists believe it is, then no ancient civilization could have mapped Antarctica's coastline directly. That should end the discussion completely. And honestly, maybe it should. But Antarctica's ice history is more complicated than many people realize. Scientists now know parts of the West Antarctic ice sheet were unstable during warmer prehistoric periods. Again, this does not prove ancient civilizations mapped Antarctica. There is no accepted evidence for that. But it does remind us that the story of Antarctica is not perfectly simple, and it leaves researchers stuck between two uncomfortable possibilities. Either the similarities between ancient maps and Antarctica are remarkable coincidences created through speculation, or fragments of geographical knowledge survived from a source tradition older than the maps themselves, not necessarily advanced civilizations, not necessarily lost continents, just older knowledge than we currently understand. And maybe that's why this mystery refuses to disappear, because it exists in the narrow space between coincidence and evidence. The ancient cartographers who created these maps were not fools. They were highly trained professionals who understood exactly what symbols meant. They knew the difference between ornament and warning. And for centuries, map after map placed monsters at the same frozen threshold, the edge of the southern world. Today, Antarctica remains one of the least explored places on Earth. Hidden beneath miles of ice are mountains, valleys, rivers, and landscapes humans have never directly seen. And when modern technology finally revealed some of those buried shapes, they looked strangely familiar. Maybe the maps were wrong. Maybe the similarities are accidental. Maybe the monsters were only artistic tradition. But maybe the real mystery isn't whether ancient people knew Antarctica existed. Maybe the real mystery is why so many cartographers believed the far south was a place people should fear. Because throughout history, humans place monsters at the edges of the unknown for one reason: to warn others not to cross the line. And somewhere, beneath the Antarctic ice, That line is still waiting. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more mysteries involving ancient history, forgotten maps, hidden civilizations, and unexplained discoveries. And tell me in the comments, do you think the Antarctic map similarities are just coincidence? Or do you believe ancient cartographers knew more than history admits?